You basically want to improve sleep quality and also quantity.
Avoid triggering this weight gain triangle.
You're going to need an approach specifically designed for women over 40.
This sensitivity to stress changes in the run-up to menopause. So for about every 1.5 pounds of fat you lose, you'll lose 1 pound of muscle. Hello and welcome to the Trinity Fit Over 40 podcast with me, Rob Burkhead.
And me, Ben Hughes. We are the co-founders of Trinity Transformation and creators of the Fit Over 40 method. And together with our world-class coaching team, we have helped more than 7,000 women over 40 to fit back into their favorite clothes over the past decade. For more information about what we do, go to www.fit40info.com.
So in today's episode, we're going to reveal how to drop a dress size by summer, even around menopause.
So it's only 2 months now till June, and we've recently been speaking to more and more women in their 40s and 50s who are looking to get on top of their fitness goals this year and drop a dress size before summer. In today's podcast, we are going to lay out step by step how you can drop a dress size by summer, even if you're over 40 and going through menopause.
Unfortunately, now you've got 2 months. Weight loss drugs, whether it's Wegovy, Saxenda, Mounjaro, Ozempic, some other variation of these weight loss injections, GLP-1 agonists, they're not going to cut it. And the reason why they're not going to cut it, they're not going to work, is because there's not enough time for them to actually work. And don't worry, there's a lot of time for other things to work. But from a recent research study, they found that people lost on average 15.8% over 68 weeks using Ozempic. And some of the others are slightly faster, but they have all of the other same negatives I'm going to talk about in a minute. Now, the average person we work with is about 12.5 stone, about 80 kilos. We have some people who start a lot heavier, some people who start a bit lighter. But what that means, 15.8% weight loss over 68 weeks, is about 0.19 kilograms per week or 0.38 pounds per week. So very, very small amount. And that's great if you've got a year and a half to do it. In some ways, I'll come on to why it's not great in some ways too. But if you want to lose the weight by June, and we're in April now, and you've got a holiday in June or July, it's only going to be 3 pounds by June or about 4 pounds by July. That's a very, very small amount. And what is also a problem is not all of that will be body fat. And body fat is the wobbly, jelly-like substance, the thing that we generally want to lose that looks like your bingo wings, or it might be the kind of firm, visceral fat around the middle, which is really bad for your health. That's the bit that we tend to want to lose, but not all of that. When now they're looking at this research again into these weight loss drugs, not all of the weight you'll see on these drugs is going to be from body fat. So for about every 1.5 pounds of fat you lose, you'll lose 1 pound of muscle. So almost as much muscle as fat is being lost. And this is really problematic. Not only will that make you look a bit like a deflated balloon, because muscle is what makes you firm, what makes you toned and youthful. And we're seeing more and more of these things on social media now where people are looking like a deflated balloon. They're looking like a sack of porridge. It's really harsh, but it is what tends to happen on these drugs for a lot of people because they lose so much muscle. But they'll also have a slower metabolism. They'll also end up frailer. And I was speaking to a client at the weekend. We had a big event at the weekend. And she was saying she recently saw a lady who was taking Ozempic and she was about 60. So again, our average client's about 50, but we have clients all the way up to 70. And she said this lady had grandchildren and she was trying to carry her 1-year-old granddaughter and she was swaying and staggering around and ultimately couldn't. And she had to go down a few stairs and couldn't go down the stairs because she'd lost so much muscle. She'd lost all her strength. And that's the problem with these things that only focus on fat loss, these weight loss drugs, is there's quite a sinister side to it. So this lady was now no longer able to enjoy playing with her grandchildren because of the massive muscle loss. So if you're going to use them to try and lose weight by summer and you've not started already, you're probably only going to lose 3 pounds and over 1 pound of that is going to be muscle. So at least 1.5 pounds of that's going to be muscle. Just for comparison, our clients typically lose exactly an average of 12.9 pounds in 12 weeks. That was the average of our clients last year. That's 1.075 pounds per week. So it's three times more than you would lose on the weight loss drugs. And our clients all see a significant increase in muscle and strength. So a lot of our clients are lifting twice as much weight after 6 months than they did when they started. So they're much stronger, they're much more firm, they're much more toned because they've got all this extra muscle. And quite a few of our clients lose up to 2 stone in 12 weeks who have more weight to lose, so up to 30 pounds. And they see an increase in muscle and bone mass. So weight loss drugs are not going to cut it unless you've only got a couple of pounds you want to lose and you don't care that you're going to lose a load of muscle or make you flabbier. Otherwise, they're not going to cut it. You need much, much longer for them to take effect. And you really need to be very careful how you compensate for them. We do have a couple of clients using them, but you've got to be really specific with your approach to make sure you don't lose much muscle. You minimize that muscle loss and your bone density loss. Otherwise, you're actually going to age much, much faster. So that's kind of what not to do. And we're going to cover a few other things also, what not to do in terms of diet, in terms of exercise approaches that are not optimal around menopause. But Ben, what's the first thing that people should be doing? That's quite a negative start. So I want to now focus on what they can be doing.
So the first thing that you should be doing is to do something that is right for your body and hormones, because this is one of the most important factors when you're a woman in your 40s, 50s or 60s, because you are going through those hormonal changes. And you know, we've said over and over again, if you've listened to this podcast, lots of the things that would work in your 20s and 30s are not going to work for women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, which is why we wouldn't recommend things like slimming groups or things like really low calorie dieting, things like doing loads of cardio or gym classes. And we're going to explain why all those things don't work. But what you were saying previously, Rob, about these weight loss drugs, they just kind of fit into that same category. Because all of those things that do work for women in their 20s and 30s, the only thing that those things really focus on is getting you to either eat less food through dieting or getting you to burn more calories through loads of exercise. And if you are in your 20s and 30s, and you know, people in their 20s and 30s, even if they cut their calories down really low or they do loads of like intense cardio, they actually can still maintain muscle fairly well as they lose that body fat. So things like these weight loss drugs, they probably work fine for those people in their sort of 20s. But for the same reason that all of these other things don't work, crash dieting, cardio, slimming groups, etc., for women over 40, these weight loss drugs just won't work as well. Because the only thing they actually do is they just make you eat less food. They just stop you being so hungry, and then you eat less, and then you take in less calories. So it's essentially just the same as if you went on a really restrictive kind of low calorie diet, essentially. And you know, because that low calorie dieting doesn't work for women over 40, the weight loss drugs, for the same reason, will just never work. But what you've got to do instead is find an approach that does work for women over 40. So physical and hormonal changes start about 5 to 10 years before clinical menopause. So menopause is defined as 1 year after you've had the last period. And then there's kind of no more after that. Once you reach that point of menopause, you know, the changes, but the changes that can happen in terms of the way that your body loses body fat, your metabolism, all those kind of menopause symptoms, there's many, many, many of them, can start sort of 5 to 10 years before that as your hormones just start to kind of fluctuate. What this can lead to, though, so the key changes that are going to be relevant for what we're talking about, so losing body fat, dropping that dress size by summer, is it will lead to a heightened stress response. It will lead to changing levels of progesterone and estrogen. It can lead to joint aches and pains. It can lead to changes in metabolism. All of those basically can make it easier to gain weight. And it will also kind of cause your body to want to store more body fat around the middle area, and especially make it difficult to lose that body fat from around the middle area. So it can make it easier to gain weight, and it can make it difficult to lose that weight again. And this is why so many women end up stuck and unable to see results. So the key here is, rather than taking a general fitness approach, rather than just following the basic approach of, you know, maybe eat less or burn more calories or take weight loss injections that make you eat less, these kind of basic approaches that would usually work for your average dieter in their 20s and 30s, none of those are going to work. So you're going to need an approach specifically designed for women over 40 that works with changing hormones rather than working against them. So, Rob, in terms of that approach, what is that kind of the first thing that people need to focus on, the first thing that people need to get right?
So the first thing I'd recommend people do is to get their exercise working with their changing body and hormones. So when you're younger, as you've alluded to, Ben, you can kind of just do whatever you want. Your body and your hormones are in a great place. You've got more estrogen, you've got more testosterone as well. Even as females, you actually have 3 times more testosterone than estrogen. And both of those things really help make it easy to lose weight with any approach. You can get away with almost anything. So you can just follow that usual age-old adage of eat less, move more, and get results. But the big change that happens is this sensitivity to stress changes in the run-up to menopause. And this can start to happen for women in their late 30s or early 40s as estrogen and progesterone start to change. And estrogen is a hormone that helps to buffer cortisol, the main stress hormone. And as that drops, you cannot get away with stressing the body in the same way. The body perceives all different sources of stress the same way. Exercise is one form of stress. Starving yourself is another form of stress. Increasing stress around work. A lot of our clients are, getting more and more stressed through work because they are higher up in their career. They may be changing roles. They may be have more responsibility than ever. They're reporting to directors. They've got back-to-back meetings, email inboxes just overflowing. Plus, a lot of them are also caring for aging parents or losing family members. It's a very stressful time. And because the body can't deal with stress so well, due to these lower estrogen levels, it's very easy to push it over the edge with extreme exercise. And if you do that, it tends to put the body into a state where we call it the weight gain triangle, where it's more likely to gain weight and less likely to be able to lose it, and more likely to gain it around the middle. And this includes types of exercise like gym classes. So most gym classes are basically a form of HIIT, so high intensity interval training. All of those are extremely stressful. Things like body pump, things like body attack. Great if you're 20, really not a good idea if you're a woman over 40. Spinning is HIIT on a bike. So same thing again, potentially even worse because there's less of a muscle building element to it. Running can be done like HIIT, or it's just long duration steady cardio, which is also very stressful on the body. All of these can be very, very stressful. And many of them are also very stressful or high impact on the joints. And if you're listening to this and you are going through menopausal changes, you'll know you'll have more joint aches and pains than probably ever before, because estrogen is a natural joint lubricant and a natural anti-inflammatory. So it makes it much more likely you're going to get injured and have to stop, or it's just too painful to keep going. So what you want to do with your exercise approach is to avoid triggering this weight gain triangle. And it's called the weight gain triangle because there's three additional hormonal side effects of overstressing the body and chronically high cortisol: leptin resistance, insulin resistance, and thyroid deregulation, that ultimately increases cravings, slows down your metabolism, and increases fat storage around the middle. So you really want to avoid that, because all of those are going to make it harder to lose weight and easier to gain it. And the best way to do this, there's two sides to this. The first one is with your specific sort of workouts, and then the other one we'll come on to is what other exercise you can do. But you want to avoid overstressing the body. So we do this using something called LIST, which is by far and away the most effective form of exercise around menopause, which is low impact strength training. It's effectively lifting weights in slow and controlled manner from home or from the gym, lifting relatively heavier than most people think, for less repetitions than they think. It's about quality, not quantity. And the reason this works so well is it's low stress, it's low impact, and it rebuilds that lost muscle and lost bone. And this tends to have a lot of side effects people don't realize. It tends to kind of pull all the muscles in, flatten your stomach, firm up your bingo wings, get rid of them, lift your bum. It kind of adds that shape you might have had when you were younger back again, that firmness. And it will aid weight loss because it's keeping stress on the body low. And it doesn't take very long. Because it's so effective, it can typically be done in just 30 minutes, 3 times a week from home. That's what most of our clients do. And they typically do drop 1 to 2 dress sizes in 12 weeks. So if you're looking to drop a dress size by summer and you want to be firmer and more toned, this is going to be by far the best type of exercise to do. So that's the first piece with exercise. Where would you say people should start in terms of nutrition, Ben?
In terms of nutrition, I'd say the best place for people to start would be with a diet makeover. So it's very easy to get stuck in poor food and drink habits, especially, as you said, Rob, if you've got a really stressful career. When life gets stressful, people often fall into these bad habits. Imagine living in a home that you've cherished for years.
You've done your best to keep it in good condition,
But no matter how much you clean, paint, or repair,
the problems keep piling up.
The cracks are showing, the roof is leaking, and it feels like everything is getting worse despite your best efforts.
For many women, losing weight around menopause feels just like that.
You've tried diets, workouts, and advice,
but the results don't come and the frustration keeps growing.
That's where our Fit Over 40 private coaching program comes in.
Think of us as your expert renovation team.
We know exactly how to fix the root issues, rebuild your confidence, and create lasting results, just like restoring a home to its best condition.
If you're ready to finally see results that last, click the link in the description below now. Let us help you restore the body and the life you deserve.
They end up on the sofa after work, having a glass of wine, having a bag of crisps, opening the chocolates. All of those unhealthy foods come out. And unfortunately, they're very Moorish. It's very easy to overeat on them. It's very easy to consume too many calories, which then, if you're also dealing with these hormonal changes, can very quickly lead to a lot of weight accumulating, especially around that middle area. The more of these foods you have as well, the more you want. So it's really important to break the cycle. And we do this using a process called the diet makeover. So in our programs and for our coaching clients. So for 1 to 2 weeks, basically you cut out 4 problem food groups. And these are what we call the WADS foods. So WADS foods. And those 4 food groups are wheat, alcohol, dairy, and sugar. These foods are high in calories. They are highly addictive. They disrupt hormones, especially the alcohol and sugar. And a lot of people have intolerances that they may not even realize. For example, they'll maybe have intolerance to wheat, maybe have intolerance to dairy that has been, potentially for years making them feel sluggish, affecting their energy levels, stopping them from feeling their best, and they don't even realize. So we kind of do a complete reset, cut all of these things out, which allows people to figure out, how do they feel when they remove these foods from their diet? It allows them to break the cycle of kind of using sugar for a pick-me-up for energy, or kind of using alcohol to wind down or anything like that. And it also allows them to see, how do I feel when I remove anything that I could be potentially have an intolerance to? And then in the future, we slowly kind of reintroduce those things back in and help people find a way of eating that kind of really works for them and their kind of specific situation. So when our clients do this, it's not uncommon for them to lose around about 4 to 6 pounds in a week or two. So another bonus of this diet makeover is you can start seeing some quick results. So you start seeing quick results in terms of weight loss. Most clients also start feeling a lot more energetic, just feeling better in themselves. They've got more energy to do workouts. It gives them a bit of momentum, and it helps them to reduce cravings. And then from there, it just sets you up with a really good foundation to then go on and see a lot more progress going forwards.
Yeah, it's a really important process, isn't it, to start with that before you get into more nutrition habits. Most people try and go into reducing calories, which we talked about is probably a bit of an extreme approach anyway. That's not going to work. But they go into these things where the body isn't, and the habits aren't in a place to actually implement them consistently, and then they constantly fall off the wagon. And interesting point you made there, Ben, about intolerances to food. So especially wheat and dairy are really common, aren't they? At the weekend, again, we had this event on, we had some guest speakers, and we had a menopause expert doing a menopause masterclass. And she was saying how you can develop intolerances during the menopause transition. It's quite a common thing to develop a dairy intolerance or a wheat intolerance. And you can have never had an intolerance to it before. And then due to so many changes happening in the body, they can start to happen as well. So it's a really important thing to do, to see if you have got something now that could be causing massive bloating, low energy, skin breakouts, all sorts of, it could be flaring up menopause symptoms as well. So that diet makeover is really important. So we've talked about exercise. We've talked about the best type of exercise to do is that low impact strength training as a kind of foundation to exercise. We talked about the start of the nutrition with the diet makeover. The next thing I would recommend people do is to look at their step count. It's so basic, but what we tend to see with our clients is they are sitting a hell of a lot. They're in jobs where they're in meetings all day, and they find it very hard to get out, especially in winter. But as we go towards summer, it still can be a challenge because they've got all these demands on them. And then they've got to go rush around and, either do the school run, or if they've got older children, they might be going to care for their parents. They're sat in the car on the way there. And it makes it really, really difficult to lose weight because they're moving so little. there is a point where you can't lose weight because you are just not moving enough. Even if you're doing 3 30-minute workouts a week, it doesn't add up to enough. The general day-to-day movement and what is called NEPA, so non-exercise physical activity, is not high enough to lose weight. And the reason steps are so important, rather than saying, let's go and do more gym classes, let's do a spin class, let's do that, is because those are all too stressful for the body around menopause, and they can actually backfire and make things worse. So we need to add in a bit more low stress movement to burn calories in this low stress way. And we've seen so many clients see a massive improvement in their weight loss results because it's done in this low stress way, but it is burning a few more calories. And I had a client, Natasha, come and speak to me this weekend and say, I was kind of plateaued. I wasn't really seeing much progress. And then I worked with my coach, with Jen, and we realized I was just doing like 2,000 steps a day because I was in meetings a lot and I just wasn't really paying attention to it. We increased this a bit, so sort of between like 7,000 and 10,000 a day, so not a crazy number of steps. And she said, not only am I feeling way better for getting out and getting that mood boost, but I've lost 1.5 stone since making that change. So it's a really significant increase to progress from a fairly, a fairly unexpected thing. I think a lot of people think they have to do something really brutal and sweaty and hard, and it's not going to work now. So you don't need to do 10,000 steps a day. Just aim for some kind of improvement. And 1,000 steps burns roughly 40 calories extra. Well, I wouldn't just look at it as a calorie equation, but if you can add 5,000 steps a day, it's an extra 200 calories a day. And that's the difference between maintaining and losing 0.5 pound of fat a week. So already that's going to give you a big boost. If that's 8 weeks till summer, it's going to be an extra 4 pounds of fat you're going to lose without burning that muscle, because it's a nice low stress way of doing it, unlike a lot of those cardio exercises. So the next thing I'd recommend you do is to get moving a bit more, track your step count and increase your step count.
So the next thing you can focus on is your sleep. So a lack of sleep can have a bigger impact on your fat stores than you actually might realize. A short night's sleep can actually disrupt your hormones, specifically leptin and ghrelin. So those are basically hunger hormones. Ghrelin is the hormone responsible for regulating your appetite, and leptin regulates our feeling of fullness, so the cue to kind of stop eating. After a poor night's sleep, ghrelin levels increase, leptin levels decrease. What this means is you feel more hungry and you feel less full, hence the munchies that you'll experience after a late night. So in the book, Why We Sleep, Matthew Walker, he reveals a fascinating study that basically backs this up. So they studied 2 groups of people, one sleeping 8 hours a night and another group sleeping 5 hours a night. Everything else was kept completely consistent. Then they presented both with a buffet. So they just said, here's a buffet, eat however much you want. And the group sleeping 5 hours a night ate 300 calories more in one sitting than the group sleeping 8 hours a night. And 300 calories a day extra is actually enough to gain 2 stone in a year just from a lack of sleep. So if you're looking at your results between now and summer, and if we say, we've got about a quarter of a year, something like that, that could be a 0.5 stone weight gain just from lack of sleep, which is either going to mean you get heavier over that period of time, or it completely stops you from losing any weight or seeing any of the progress you want to see. So not only does sleep disrupt cortisol levels, which can make it harder for women over 40 to lose weight, it can also make it easier for them to gain weight, but also it increases cravings and it makes you eat more. So you basically want to improve sleep quality and also quantity until ideally you're sleeping 7 to 8 hours most nights, although any improvement is good. So any progress you can make is good. And I think sleep's one of those things where there's quite a lot of variation from person to person. Some people find it very, very difficult to get to sleep. Some people find it difficult to sleep through the night. Some people will easily, they can just put their head on the pillow and they'll sleep through the entire night. So you've got to sort of think about your own starting point and just aim to make a small improvement from there. And we help our clients to improve their sleep through a number of ways, from optimizing their hormones, improving their sleep environment, their nutrition, managing things like caffeine and work-life balance. And what that means is not only do they feel better, because getting enough sleep obviously is going to help your energy levels, it also helps keep their hormones in the right balance. It helps reduce hunger, and it ultimately helps them to see faster and better results.
And it was really interesting. I know I keep coming back to this weekend, but it's because it's just happened. The menopause talk, Catherine, who was speaking, was going through all these different side effects. And she said, who else wakes up at 3 a.m.? Who's in the 3 a.m. club? And more than half the room raised their hand. We had a big room of people. And it's very, very common that I think people can then despair and think, what's the point in even trying to work on my sleep because it's so broken around menopause? But there's loads of things you can do. The things you've already talked about, Ben, in terms of diet improvements help. Actually working out the right way will make you sleep better. But we also, as you said, we work on all these other things: caffeine in the afternoon, alcohol, sugar, supplements like magnesium can make a big difference. And that's why we really work we try to work with a lot of people one-to-one, because it's so unique to every person. Which kind of brings me on to the next point, which is if you want to get good results quickly, which by now it is going to have to be relatively quickly to lose a dress size by summer, the next thing I'd recommend is to get some sort of expert support and accountability. Because if you don't quite know what to do, it can take a few weeks, or it can take a few months, or it can take, for a lot of people, actually, they never figure it out. But to work out how to change with your body, now it's different around menopause. So if you've only got 8 weeks till summer, you really need to know what to do quickly and how to address things like broken sleep quickly. What's the quick things you can do to get that from 4 hours a night to 6 hours, which would make a huge difference to your energy and your results. And the other piece of this is also having someone to keep you accountable so that you stick to it even when you don't feel like it. And it's a bit like having a boss at work. You know, you probably don't feel like working every day. You don't feel like getting out of bed, going into those meetings all day. But you know, if you don't, that boss or the directors or your team, if you run the business, they will be wondering where you are, and you have that accountability. So you show up even though it's hard, even though you don't feel like it. And this is really, really important around menopause, because you're not going to feel like exercising all the time. You're not going to feel like increasing those steps all the time or making those dietary improvements all the time. And so many people say the reason they saw such good results by coming to us is because they finally had someone who knew what to do when things went wrong, and someone who was keeping an eye on them and keeping them accountable. And we're not like the police, but we do monitor what everyone's doing in our one-to-one coaching. And if we notice they've drifted off track, we're in touch to see how we can help and get them back on track. And I don't recommend you get this accountability from a friend or family member. Never really works in practice, because a friend will let you off the hook. They'll go, don't worry, one won't hurt. It's just one day, but they'll say that far too often, so you don't get results. And a family member, especially if it's your partner, often that backfires and we see it as nagging and we get annoyed and it causes arguments, and then we eat the chocolate anyway to spite them, and it doesn't tend to work very well. So you need someone who's impartial, someone you respect, who's an expert in what you're trying to achieve. And this is one of the key reasons our coaching clients see fantastic results, because every one of them has a one-to-one coach. They're assigned a coach they work with the entire time. Our coaches all have over a decade of experience. So they're really, really experienced, and they hold them to a higher standard than they might do on their own, but in a loving, maybe loving is the wrong word, but in the empathetic, kind, supportive way. They're not there saying, why didn't you do it? Unless the person said that's what they need. They're often there saying, let's see how we can make this work next week. And they're there to support them through the ups and downs that you're inevitably going to have. So the next point I would say is get some expert support and accountability.
And the final thing that can really help is to be part of a community. So your identity gets shaped by the people who you surround yourself with on a daily basis. So for example, if everyone at your work is constantly eating treats and cakes every week, I know when I used to work in an office, there'd always be someone finding a reason to bring in, I thought, in a tray of cakes for my birthday. And the next week, now it's Easter eggs. Now it's whatever. There's always some reason that somebody brings in a massive load of cakes and muffins and cookies and stuff. And if that becomes your normal life, then it's easy to just get sucked into that. And obviously doing that on a regular basis, it's not going to leave you looking and feeling your best. So if none of your family members are into exercise as well, you'll likely end up doing less active activities in order to fit in with everybody else. Same with your friendship group. If your friends are not sort of fit and active, if they're not going out, hiking and doing active things, you're probably going to go and do whatever they do, which might be, going and sitting down and having a few drinks kind of thing. And if those are the habits that you follow, you're going to find that that's going to give you a certain result in terms of fitness. We're basically hardwired to fit in, because back in caveman times, it was essential to be part of a tribe in order to survive. You had to kind of remain part of that tribe and follow what everybody else was doing in order to not get kicked out. Because if you were kicked out of the tribe, you were not likely to survive in the wild, essentially. Therefore, if you're surrounded by people who are on the same mission as you, who are working on their fitness goals, who are eating healthy, who are exercising regularly, that sets a really good example for you to follow. So you'll now try and fit in with those healthy habits rather than with the unhealthy habits. If you do this for long enough, eventually you'll start to identify as being a healthy person, and those habits will become part of your own identity as well as the group that you surround yourself with. And going forwards, you're then likely to be inspiring the other people that you surround yourself with. So your own friends, your own family, to start taking on some of those healthy habits as well, which is another benefit. And the other advantage of being surrounded by a group of people who are working towards similar goals as you is that you can build on their successes, and they can give you, for example, hints and tips about strategies which have worked for them. They can give you warnings about what to avoid, what things haven't worked. They can give you reassurance that it's worked for them and therefore it's going to work for you too. But ultimately, if you can surround yourself with a community of people who are all on the same mission as you, you're going to be much more likely to succeed.
And we have so many examples of people who've done all these things we talked about today. They've been part of the community. They've had that expert support and accountability, but most importantly, they've worked with the changing body and hormones in all those other ways we've talked about. But I've got one example here I wanted to share from Becca Ford. So she's 52. She works in a school as an office administrator and also runs an online baking business. And here's what she said after working with us for just 8 weeks inside our private coaching. So she said, I've tried various diets over the years, but what was working for me 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, wasn't giving me the same results anymore. I put it down to menopause and also a change in my metabolism. I felt so disheartened and that this was just the way it was going to be. I'd have to accept that as we get older, we naturally gain weight and there was nothing I could do about it. Then I saw an advert on Facebook which caught my eye. I hadn't seen anything before which was specifically targeted towards women over 40 and those who were in their menopausal years. It was only when I started doing a little bit of research and I saw the Trustpilot reviews that I became more intrigued and even signed up for my first consultation call. In the past, I tried various diets, the most recent one being Slimming World about 5 years ago, but the weight just slowly piled back on. However, since joining Trinity over the last 8 weeks, I have lost 9.5 pounds and I'm striving towards losing a stone by the end of 12 weeks. I've completely changed my eating habits through my journey with Trinity, and as a result, all my bad habits and old cravings have stopped. I've cut out lots of foods that weren't doing me any good anymore and replaced them with foods that are nutritious, filling, and protein rich. I feel more confident, healthy, and generally more toned. I've dropped a dress size and all my clothes are fitting me better. I've found my figure again. And if you're on the fence like I was, I urge you to do it. You won't regret it. So amazing results there from Becca. 1 dress size down and 9.5 pounds down and more toned within 8 weeks. And as we said at the beginning, you can't do that with weight loss drugs. You'd only be 3 pounds down and a lot less toned. So Ben, where can people go if they want to find out more about the program Becca and thousands of other women have used to achieve results like this, even in their 40s, 50s and 60s around menopause?
If you want to find out more about our Fit Over 40 program and our private coaching, head over to www.fit40info.com and you can find all of the details on that page.
So that just about wraps up for today's podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you next week for another episode. We will see you then. If you're fed up with trying everything and seeing no results,
Watching your weight creeping up and struggling to fit into your clothes,
and you're looking for the fastest and easiest way to get your ideal weight
and never have to worry about your weight or health again,
you can save yourself years of trial and error by letting us take care of the hard work for you in our Fit Over 40 private coaching program.
Over the past decade, our world-class team have personally guided more than 7,000 women to take back control of their health and confidence, and more importantly, maintain those results for life.
If you're ready to finally get results at last and find out how we can help you do that too, click the link in the description below to get the full details now.